Thanks, guys, for that first carrier update. Guess that ticker. It's a fun game that we should play more often here on FreightWaves Now. We've got our air cargo editor, Eric Kulisch, in with us this morning for our first guest today, talking about how really that air market capacity still has not loosened at all. Eric, thank you for joining us this morning. How are you on this Thursday?
Hey, doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. And so we're going to start off this morning talking a little bit about the crisis that's going on in Chicago right now. Congestion is just off the charts at those major airports in Chicago, leading people to kind of seek space elsewhere in those outlying areas. Tell us about what's going on.
Yeah, as has been happening for, nearly a year, just Chicago and Los Angeles and some of the other major gateways are really crushed by the influx of freight coming in with so much import demand from Asia and other parts of the world. And, the airports are just have more than they can handle. The freighters are, some of these warehouses are getting 4 or 5 freighters a day. And in the past, the freight used to come in smaller chunks with all the passenger traffic, the wide body international planes. But now it's just coming in these, big giant chunks all at once, and they're overwhelmed. They've had staff cutbacks, with COVID and so forth, or to save money when the passenger airlines cut back on some of their contracts. So they're overwhelmed, and what we've reported a couple of times is what I like to call, these cargo refugees from Chicago, O'Hare. A couple major forwarders have shifted some of their charter flights about 70 miles to the west to Chicago Rockford International Airport, where they can get on-ramp service and get, their freight picked up quickly rather than customers having to wait 4 or 5 days. And now we're reporting that some of the ground handlers with warehouses at O'Hare, they like to have, or all their facilities are airside. The plane comes in, they unload the stuff, it goes into a cross dock, hopefully for 12 hours or a day at the most, and then it's out to the truckers picking up. But like I said, the waits are 4 or 5 days sometimes, and they can't deconsolidate or break down these loads. So a couple of these ground handlers have picked up some large warehouse leases off campus or outside the airport, 5-10 minutes away, so that they'll just truck the stuff straight off the plane to these warehouses and do the import collections and import receiving away from the airport. So they're hoping it'll improve some of the flow of freight and get these forwarders their goods.
And so that's been kind of this long time coming of this backlog happening, right? We saw it on the Maritime, and it was kind of pretty obvious when that was happening there. Is it unique to
Yep.
see this continuing to be so stressful in the air cargo market as more passenger capacity comes back online? Or is it just the fact that there's still such a limitation on those international flights that's really contributing to this influx of international freight?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. It's just the huge volumes of international freight and e-commerce that just doesn't seem to be abating, with the economy so strong and people just wanting these goods right away and inventory buildup. And then on the other hand, it's just this weird dynamic where the instead of the freight coming in a metered fashion, a couple freighters a day, international wide body passenger planes bringing in smaller chunks of freight. It's manageable. Now it's just coming in these, giant waves all at once, and they're overwhelmed. So, I think we're going to see that probably, for most of the year, because, unless some of these mitigation factors start to help, because we're not seeing any let up in the freight volumes.
Right, and that's not going to happen really anytime soon from what I'm hearing from pretty much everybody that we talk to here at FreightWaves. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about what's going on with the FAA. They've kind of implemented some of these new electronic database rules to kind of keep tabs on people as they're moving throughout their careers in the airline industry. Tell me what's happening with that.
Yeah, so today actually, the Federal Aviation Administration is putting out a new rule that commercial airlines, cargo airlines will have to start using an electronic clearinghouse for their employee or pilot records, so that, with the idea that rather than passing around paper documents or sending FedEx packages to employers with a pilot's background checks information. They'll be able to search it all in one centralized place. And the idea is that, sometimes, there's a lot of good pilots, but then you have some bad apples or just ones that aren't, very good at their job. And, you leave one employer and you tell them, you give them your resume, they do a partial background check, but they don't get the complete history. And so, sometimes guys fall through the cracks and you have some accidents or like happened in 2019 when an Atlas Air cargo jet flying for Amazon crashed in Texas. Turned out the co-pilot had some negative history as far as poor marks in his training, where he showed that he wasn't able to adjust to kind of crisis situations in the air, and he had hid some of his background. So this gets at that, and it's supposed to just make things more efficient and get some of the medical history, employee terminations, pilot training records, all those kinds of things that are either held by the FAA or by an employer will now be in a centralized place and can be checked more easily.
It seems like something. I was shocked when I saw this, right? Because it seems like, really?
It's like a no-brainer. Like you would think that,
we weren't already doing this. We weren't already doing.
Well, and it's a good point because Congress mandated this like in 2010. So now it's 11 years later. This won't start to go fully into effect till next year. So you're talking a dozen years for the FAA to get around to it. I'm sure they've been working on it, but
to buy computers and stuff like that. They had to get computers and build out a nice spreadsheet for it, I suppose. But so I think I know the answer to this, but let's talk about it. We talk about package handlers or cargo handlers moving out of O'Hare to relieve the congestion instead of moving out to Rockford to 70 miles away. Capacity super tight, man. It's going to continue, yes?
Yeah, the capacity situation is very tight. The International Air Transport Association yesterday came out with its April statistics, which aren't the best. They're a lagging indicator. We're already in June, so trying to connect to the current market's a little difficult. But even then, they said that cargo demand was up 12% from April of 2019 and up about 8% from March. So very strong showing in the air cargo market. And they said that capacity is still about 10% lower than pre-pandemic. I tend to think it could be a little worse than that, but one of the data providers recently said that there was a drop in cargo demand in May, a 4% drop, but we're not hearing that from other signs that we're picking up and from freight forwarders. They're saying that their volumes are still way up. Demand has been very strong, particularly on the Trans-Pacific, and you're seeing a lot of conversion from ocean shipping because of all the problems there with getting a container or getting on a vessel. So and the capacity situation's still bad. 87% of wide body aircraft are still not flying. It might look great on the domestic side, but these wide body planes are not flying. So capacity is going to be really bad, especially on the Trans-Pacific.
Eric, to that point, didn't I just see recently the U.S. opened or lessened restrictions on, I think, 61 countries travel? 61. That should help a little bit, right? Or did that not include major trading partners?
I didn't see the full list, but I think you're right. The same thing's happening in Europe. Spain and France are opening up now, at least to fully vaccinated travelers.
Yeah.
And at least from countries that are somewhat considered low risk. So yeah, you're going to start seeing a gradual increase. It might just though be for the summer months, right? And then it drops back down in the fall and winter. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But the Trans-Pacific's had some COVID demand. There's been a little bit of a softening in demand potentially in the last week or two because there's some COVID flare-ups in Vietnam, Taiwan, Malaysia, and so those countries don't mess around. They kind of lock down or close up quickly. So that's kind of put a little bit of damper on demand, I'm hearing, in the last week or two. So we'll have to see. And once they lift those restrictions, demand should shoot right back up, I'm told.
Awesome, Eric. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Go keep an eye on what he's working on for both American Shipper and on FreightWaves.com.